At 7:18 on a cold Columbus morning, Evan Lewis stopped at a red light and forgot to breathe. Across East Broad Street, a massive billboard showed the face of Natalie Lewis, the wife he had walked out on exactly 1 year earlier. She stood beside a sewing machine, calm and confident, with an old yellow measuring tape around her neck. Evan knew that tape. The last time he had seen it, Natalie was standing in their kitchen with 2 sleeping children down the hall and exactly $240 he had left on the table. He had driven away believing she would never make it without him. Now horns screamed behind his car as Evan stared upward, wondering what had happened during the year he chose not to see. Before we go back to that night, tell us what country you're watching from and your local time, and if stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength mean something to you. Subscribe and stay with us. Exactly 1 year earlier, at 10:43 p.m., Natalie Lewis was standing barefoot in the kitchen of their second-floor apartment in Columbus, Ohio, scraping dried macaroni from Caleb's plastic dinner plate when she heard the bedroom closet open. It was a small sound, a sliding door, a hanger knocking against another hanger, a zipper being pulled, but something about it made her stop. The faucet continued running over her hands. Evan. No answer. Natalie shut off the water, dried her palms on a faded dish towel, and walked down the narrow hallway. Evan Lewis stood beside their bed with a dark duffel bag open in front of him. 3 shirts were folded inside. His shaving kit was already packed. So were his work shoes. Natalie stared at the bag. This wasn't anger. Anger packed badly. Anger threw shirts into a suitcase and forgot the toothbrush. This had been planned. "How long have you known?" she asked. Evan finally looked at her. "I got the call Monday. It was Thursday." Natalie leaned against the doorframe. What call the Indianapolis job? For months, Evan had complained about commissions getting smaller at the office equipment company where he worked. Bills had accumulated on the kitchen counter. Their credit card had reached its limit. Twice that winter, Natalie had paid the electric bill late so they could buy groceries. She had known Evan was unhappy. She had not known he had been building an exit. "When do you start Monday?" Natalie looked at the packed bag again. "So we leave this weekend." Evan's jaw tightened. "Natalie." That one word answered her. She stood very still. "You're going alone. I need to get settled first." "Settled? It's a better territory, better commission structure. If I do well, I can finally get ahead." Natalie's expression changed. Get ahead of what? Evan rubbed both hands over his face. "This. All of this." His gesture seemed to include the apartment, the overdue bills, the second-hand dresser, the laundry basket near the wall. Maybe even her. "I'm 37 years old," he said. "Every month we're deciding which bill gets paid late. Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, something else happens." Natalie's voice remained quiet. "And you think I don't know that I didn't say that? You didn't have to." From the children's bedroom came the faint hum of the night light. Natalie lowered her voice. "What about Aaliyah and Caleb?" Evan looked toward the hallway. For several seconds he said nothing. "I'll send money." "That wasn't my question. I need time. They need a father now." "I said I'll send money." Natalie studied the man she had been married to for 11 years. She suddenly understood that there was nothing she could say that he had not already argued against inside his own head. Evan picked up the duffel bag. "Maybe once I'm stable we can figure out what happens next." He looked away. That hurt more than if he had shouted. Natalie stepped aside. She would not stand in a doorway begging a man to remain in a home he had already left in his mind. In the kitchen, Evan reached into his wallet. He counted bills onto the table. $200 bills, 220s, $240. Natalie stared at them. "What is that?" "It's what I have in cash. Rent is due Wednesday. I know, it's $985. I know, Natalie." "The checking account," Evan hesitated. "There's not much in it." "How much? I don't know exactly." "You checked this afternoon?" He said nothing. Natalie felt anger rise into her throat, but she swallowed it. Not because he deserved calm, because 2 children were sleeping 20 feet away. Evan picked up his keys. "I'll call tomorrow." Natalie looked at him. "No, call your children tomorrow." His face tightened. For half a second, she saw shame. Then he opened the door. Cold March air entered the apartment. "Nat." She waited. Whatever he had intended to say disappeared. The door closed. Natalie stood alone. She heard his footsteps descend the stairs. Then the building door opened. Then shut. A minute later, headlights moved across the kitchen wall and disappeared. Natalie did not follow him to the window. She sat at the kitchen table. The $240 remained where he had placed it. She opened her banking app, checking $63.41. Savings $11.08. Natalie stared at the numbers until the screen dimmed. Rent was due in 6 days. Her car needed gas. She was scheduled for only 26 hours at the hospital the following week. The refrigerator held 6 eggs, half a gallon of milk, 7 slices of bread margarine, half an onion, 3 apples, and a container of leftover macaroni. The silence behind her changed. Natalie turned. Aaliyah stood in the hallway. Her 9-year-old daughter wore purple pajama pants and an oversized school t-shirt. Her curls were flattened on one side from sleep. "How long have you been there?" Aaliyah shrugged. "Where did Dad go?" Natalie pulled out the chair beside her. "Come here." Aaliyah walked over but did not sit. "Is he coming back tomorrow?" Natalie could have lied. Tomorrow would have been easier with a lie. But tomorrow eventually becomes another tomorrow. "No," she said gently. "Not tomorrow." Aaliyah looked at the money. "Did he leave us?" Natalie's throat tightened. "He made a decision to go to Indianapolis for work." "That's not what I asked." Natalie looked at her daughter. 9 years old enough to recognize when adults rearranged words to hide the truth. Before Natalie could answer, Aaliyah asked something else. "Are we poor now?" Natalie almost smiled from the painful innocence of it. She could have said no. She could have promised everything would be fine. Instead, Natalie reached for the kitchen drawer beside her. Inside were scissors, batteries, takeout menus, birthday candles, and an old yellow measuring tape. The tape had belonged to Natalie's grandmother, Lorraine. Lorraine had taught Natalie to sew when she was 11. Whenever young Natalie rushed to cut fabric, her grandmother would tap the scissors against the table. Measure twice, cut once. Fabric cost money. Mistakes cost fabric. Therefore, patience mattered. Natalie placed the measuring tape across the table. "We're going to do something Grandma Lorraine taught me." Aaliyah touched the faded yellow tape. "What?" "We're going to measure what we have before we decide what we've lost." Aaliyah finally sat down. Natalie found 4 old envelopes. On the first, she wrote rent. On the second, groceries. On the third, gas. On the fourth, emergency. She divided the $240. Every bill she moved seemed absurdly small compared with what waited for them. Still, she counted carefully. Aaliyah watched. "Is that enough?" Natalie stopped. "No." The honesty frightened the child. Natalie immediately took her hand. "But not having enough tonight doesn't mean we stop thinking tomorrow. What are we going to do? I don't know yet." That answer frightened Natalie more than it frightened Aaliyah, but she refused to decorate uncertainty with false promises. "I do know one thing," Natalie added. "You and Caleb are going to eat, you're going to school, and I'm going to keep moving until I figure out the next thing." Aaliyah nodded. Natalie walked her back to bed. Caleb was asleep sideways beneath his dinosaur blanket, one foot sticking out. Aaliyah climbed beside him. "Mom." "Yes." "Are you scared?" Natalie paused. "Yes." Her daughter seemed surprised, but being scared doesn't mean we're done. Natalie kissed her forehead. By 5:12 the next morning, she still had not slept. She sat again at the kitchen table, wearing her hospital uniform, a cup of reheated coffee beside her. The 4 envelopes were lined up in front of her. Rent, groceries, gas, emergency. The yellow measuring tape lay across them like a crooked line connecting everything for 11 years. Natalie had made decisions by asking what the family needed. Now the family was 3 people instead of 4. She could not change that before sunrise. She could not manufacture $700. She could not make Evan come back. But she could decide what happened to the next dollar. Natalie picked up the gas envelope. She needed enough fuel to get to work, get the children to school, and come home. Not a full tank, not even half. Enough. She wrote a number on the envelope. 18 duh? Then she reached for groceries. Outside, Columbus was beginning to wake. A city bus hissed to a stop below the apartment. Somewhere upstairs, a shower started. A truck backed into the convenience store across the street. The world had not stopped because Natalie Lewis's husband had left her. Strangely, that realization did not crush her. It clarified something. No one was coming to organize this morning for her. Natalie wrapped the old yellow measuring tape around her hand once, then carefully rolled it back up. "Measure twice," she whispered. For the first time in 11 years, every decision ahead belonged entirely to her. And in less than 3 hours, Natalie would discover that the little security she thought she still had at the hospital was already beginning to disappear. At 6:37 the next morning, Natalie Lewis stood beneath the fluorescent lights of a gas station on Livingston Avenue with one hand wrapped around the cold metal pump handle. The numbers climbed: 1244, 1508, 1763. When the display reached exactly $1,800, Natalie released the handle. She did not round it up, not even by a penny. There had been a time when she filled the tank without watching the numbers. Now every dollar had somewhere else it could be. Inside the car, Aaliyah sat beside Caleb in the back seat, holding 2 pieces of toast wrapped in paper towels. "Mom, Caleb said, 'Can I have juice? We have milk at home. I want orange juice.'" Natalie looked at him through the rearview mirror. "Then orange juice goes on the list for another day." He frowned, but accepted the toast. Aaliyah said nothing. She had been quieter since the night before. Natalie noticed everything about that silence. At 7:21, she dropped the children at school and daycare. By 7:46, she was walking through the employee entrance of Franklin Memorial Hospital, wearing navy work pants, non-slip shoes, and a gray food service shirt with Natalie Lewis clipped above her chest. The hospital kitchen was already roaring. Metal carts rattled across tile. Industrial dishwashers hissed. Trays moved down stainless steel counters beneath harsh white lights. Natalie tied on an apron. Morning. Her co-worker, Patricia Coleman, glanced over. "You look tired. Didn't sleep much." "Kids." Natalie hesitated. Something like that. She did not mention Evan. She did not want the softened voices. She did not want people asking what happened. Most of all, she did not want to become the woman everyone discussed after she left the room. So Natalie worked. She portioned oatmeal, counted fruit cups, stacked diabetic meal trays, checked labels twice. At 9:14, her supervisor, Mr. Bradley, appeared beside the prep station holding a clipboard. "Natalie, can I see you?" Something in his tone made Patricia look up. Natalie followed him into the narrow office near the freezer. Mr. Bradley closed the door. "I wanted you to hear this directly." Natalie immediately thought of her attendance. "I haven't missed no. It's not performance." That somehow frightened her more. He rubbed his forehead. The hospital finalized the food service contract. Natalie stared at him. "What contract? They're outsourcing more of dietary operations beginning next month?" "How much more?" "A lot." He exhaled. "For now, everyone's hours are being adjusted." Natalie felt something cold settle in her stomach. How adjusted? He turned the clipboard toward her. 26 hours had become 19. Natalie looked at the number twice. "That starts Monday." "Yes, I need 26. I know. Can I pick up shifts if someone calls off maybe? Maybe Natalie, I'm sorry." She hated that sentence. Not because he meant it badly, because apologies did not buy milk. Natalie nodded. Okay. Mr. Bradley seemed surprised. Okay, what else can I say? She returned to the kitchen. Patricia waited until Bradley disappeared. What happened? Hours got cut. Again, Natalie nodded. How bad 7 hours? Patricia whistled quietly. Girl. Natalie reached for another stack of trays. I'll figure it out. You apply for assistance, I'll look into everything. Sometimes you just have to wait until things turn around. Natalie placed a lid over a bowl of soup, waiting. She thought of the 4 envelopes on her kitchen table. Rent did not wait. Children did not stop eating while adults waited. Cars did not run on patience. At 2:03 that afternoon, Natalie clocked out. Before leaving, she took a blank receipt from her pocket and wrote down every dollar she had spent since Evan left. Gas $18, bread $1.89, eggs $2.49, bananas $1.36, rice $3.12, beans $2.08, milk $2.79. She added the numbers twice. Then she folded the paper into quarters and tucked it into her wallet. At school pickup, Aaliyah climbed into the car holding the front of her red winter coat together. What happened? The zipper broke. Natalie examined it. The slider had pulled away from one side. Can we get another coat? The question was casual. Natalie looked at the temperature displayed on the dashboard. 38 degrees. Not yet. Aaliyah immediately looked guilty. I can just wear my hoodie. No. Natalie touched her daughter's cheek. You didn't do anything wrong. That evening, she took the children to Harper Laundry and Alterations because the apartment building's washer had been broken for 3 days. Harper Laundry sat between a beauty supply store and a carry-out restaurant in a tired strip mall. Inside, dryers turned behind scratched glass doors. A television mounted near the ceiling played the evening news with captions. Denise Harper stood behind the counter sorting quarters into paper rolls. She was 58, with silver beginning to thread through her short, natural hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Evening, Natalie. Hey, Miss Harper. You're late tonight. Long day. Denise glanced at the children. Aaliyah homework before cartoons. Aaliyah smiled. Yes, ma'am. They had been coming there long enough for Denise to know their routines. Natalie loaded 2 washers, then sat at a plastic table with Aaliyah's coat spread across her lap. From her tote bag, she removed a small sewing kit. The zipper was worse than she had thought. She frowned. Denise noticed. Need pliers? Natalie looked up. You have some. Denise pointed beneath the counter. Natalie borrowed them. She removed the damaged slider, adjusted the teeth, reinforced the torn fabric near the base, and fitted a replacement slider she found in her sewing tin. Her hands moved differently when she sewed. Steadier. Certain. Denise stopped counting quarters. You do alterations? Not really. Denise raised an eyebrow. That zipper says otherwise. My grandmother taught me. Aaliyah looked up proudly. Mom can fix anything. Natalie smiled. Not anything. A woman standing near dryer 12 turned around. She was holding a camel-colored blazer. Excuse me? Natalie looked up. You know how to fix a tear depends where it is. The woman approached and showed her that blazer. The seam beneath one arm had split several inches. I was going to throw it out. Natalie examined the fabric. It doesn't need to be thrown out. How much Natalie froze. She had never charged anyone for sewing. Denise remained behind the counter pretending to organize receipts. Natalie looked at the tear again. $12. The woman shrugged. If you can make it look right. I can. Natalie heard the confidence in her own answer and almost wondered who had spoken. She finished the laundry first. At home, after Caleb fell asleep and Aaliyah sat beside her doing multiplication homework, Natalie turned on the lamp over the kitchen table. The blazer lay before her. Beside it was the yellow measuring tape. Natalie measured the damaged seam, then measured again. She opened the stitching, carefully reinforced the weakened section from inside, matched the thread as closely as she could, and closed the seam. When she finished, the repair was nearly invisible. The next evening, Natalie brought the blazer back. The woman tried it on beside the laundromat window. She raised both arms. Wow. Natalie felt a small warmth in her chest. The woman opened her purse. A 10, 2 ones. $12. Natalie took the money. Thank you. No, thank you. You saved me from buying another jacket. After she left, Natalie looked at the bills in her hand. $12 buy chicken, milk, bread, maybe orange juice for Caleb. She reached for her purse. Don't. Denise's voice stopped her. Natalie looked over. Don't what spend those? Natalie laughed softly. I have 2 kids, Miss Harper. Money doesn't get much time to rest around me, I know. Denise walked closer. That's why I'm telling you. Natalie's smile faded. Denise tapped the bills. Sometimes the first dollar isn't for spending. Natalie waited. Sometimes it's proof. Proof of what? That somebody paid you for something you know how to do. Natalie looked down at the money again. Not a paycheck. Not money from Evan. Not assistance. $12 because someone had brought her something broken, and Natalie had returned it useful. Aaliyah came running from the folding tables. How much did you get? $12. Her eyes widened. For fixing that. Aaliyah dug through her school backpack and found a small, white envelope left over from a classroom project. She flattened it against the table and took out a blue marker. What are you doing making you a money envelope? In large, uneven letters, she wrote, Mom's fixing money. Natalie stared at the words. For the first time since Evan walked out, something inside her shifted. Not relief. $12 could not solve their problems, but Denise was right. It was evidence. Natalie slid the bills inside. Denise returned to her counter. A few minutes later, another customer walked past carrying a pair of work pants with a torn pocket. Denise nodded toward Natalie. She might be able to fix that. Natalie looked up. The man looked at the pants, then at her. How much? Natalie glanced at the yellow measuring tape beside her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. Let me see the damage first. 3 weeks after Natalie Lewis earned her first $12, the back corner of Harper Laundry no longer looked like wasted space. It looked like possibility. At 8:26, one Tuesday evening, Natalie sat behind a folding table beneath a fluorescent light, repairing the knee of a boy's school uniform. Aaliyah did homework beside her while Caleb slept across 2 plastic chairs, his jacket folded beneath his head. The white envelope marked, Mom's fixing money, now held $74. It wasn't much, but it was growing. Denise Harper had noticed the change before Natalie did. Customers were beginning to ask for her by name. Is the sewing lady here? Can Natalie fix this? How much to shorten these? One evening, Denise approached while Natalie was packing her sewing kit. You need a proper place. Natalie smiled. And I need about 500 other things. I'm serious. Denise pointed toward an unused corner near the rear wall. You can put a table there. Natalie's smile disappeared. How much nothing? Natalie immediately shook her head. No. Denise folded her arms. You didn't even think about it. I did. I can't take free space. Why? Because your business has bills too. Denise studied her. Then she changed the offer. Fine. You clean the machines Tuesday and Thursday nights. Empty lint traps, wipe folding tables, help me close. In return, you use the corner. Natalie considered it. That's a lot of cleaning. That's a lot of corner. Natalie laughed for the first time that day. Deal? They shook hands. That mattered to Natalie. She wasn't being rescued. She was trading work for opportunity. Within a week, the folding table became her tiny workshop. The yellow measuring tape hung from her neck most evenings. Her grandmother's sewing box sat beneath the table. Natalie began keeping a notebook of every job. Zipper replacement, $14. Hem, $8. Scrub adjustment, $16. Coat pocket, $7. She wrote down material costs, too. Every dollar mattered. Her hospital hours had been reduced, and the difference was becoming painful. Some nights Natalie returned home after 10, carried Caleb upstairs asleep, checked Aaliyah's homework, prepared lunches, and then sat at the kitchen table finishing alterations until midnight. She was tired, but exhaustion felt different when it was attached to something she was building. One Thursday evening, a woman named Mrs. Dalton brought in a navy dress. "I need this taken in by Saturday." Natalie examined it. "I can do it for $28. Mrs. Dalton agreed. Natalie spent nearly 2 hours on the dress after the children went to bed. She measured twice, pinned carefully, removed part of the side seam, and reconstructed it without changing the shape. Saturday morning, Mrs. Dalton tried it on at Harper Laundry. She turned toward the mirror. "It fits." Natalie smiled. "Good." Mrs. Dalton reached into her purse and handed Natalie $15. Natalie looked at the bills. The price was $28. Mrs. Dalton shrugged. "It didn't take you that long." Natalie felt heat rise into her face. "It took almost 2 hours." "For sewing, yes." Mrs. Dalton looked around the laundromat. "You're working from a folding table." The sentence was quiet, but Natalie understood it. A folding table meant her work should be cheap. A laundromat meant she wasn't professional. Natalie needed the money badly. Rent was approaching again. Caleb needed new shoes. Her car had started making a clicking sound when she turned the ignition. $15 was better than nothing. For a moment, Natalie almost accepted it. Then she remembered Denise's words. Sometimes the first dollar is proof. Proof meant nothing if Natalie herself refused to believe what her work was worth. She placed the $15 back on the counter. The agreed price was $28. Mrs. Dalton frowned. "Seriously?" "Yes, ma'am. You're going to lose customers like that." "Maybe." Natalie surprised herself with how calmly she said it. "But I did the work we agreed on." Silence. Across the room, Denise was wiping a washing machine. She did not interfere. Finally, Mrs. Dalton pulled another $13 from her wallet. "There. Thank you." The woman took the dress and left. Natalie released the breath she had been holding. Denise continued wiping the machine. Natalie looked at her. "You heard all that. Every word. You could have helped." Denise finally turned. "No." Natalie raised an eyebrow. Denise smiled. "You didn't need help." That sentence stayed with Natalie. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah counted the money envelope. $136. Natalie looked over. "Count again." "I did." "Twice." Aaliyah rolled her eyes. "Measure twice. Count twice. I know." Natalie laughed. Caleb climbed onto her lap. "Are we rich? Absolutely not. Can we get pizza? Also no." He sighed dramatically. "But we can make pizza at home." With pepperoni, Natalie thought about the grocery envelope. Half pepperoni. Caleb accepted the negotiation. Those small evenings became the rhythm of their new life. Aaliyah learned to thread needles. Caleb learned that sleeping in a laundromat was apparently possible anywhere. Natalie learned which customers respected her work and which ones did not. Most importantly, she began learning something she had never been taught: how to place a price on her own time. One rainy Wednesday, Denise appeared beside Natalie carrying a ring of keys. "Come with me." "Where back?" Natalie followed her past the dryers to a narrow hallway. Denise unlocked a door. Inside was a small storage room. Dust covered the floor. Broken laundry baskets were stacked against one wall. An old metal shelf leaned crookedly beneath boxes of detergent advertisements. Natalie coughed. "This is terrible. I know. Why are you showing me?" Denise stepped inside. "Because I'm tired of watching your customers stand next to Dryer 9 while you measure their pants." Natalie stared at her. Denise tossed her the key. Natalie caught it. "What's this?" "If you clean this room, you can use it." Natalie looked around again. It was barely large enough for a sewing table, 2 chairs, and a clothing rack. but it had a door, a window, and privacy. How much rent? Same arrangement for now. Natalie shook her head. Denise? Don't make this sentimental. Denise pointed at the dirty floor. That room has made me exactly $0 for 6 years. You're going to clean it, bring people into my laundromat, and probably complain about the lighting. Natalie smiled. The lighting is awful. See, already complaining? Natalie walked to the small window. Outside rain streaked across the glass. For anyone else, it was an abandoned storage room behind a laundromat. Natalie saw something different. A place where customers could stand in front of a mirror. A shelf for thread. A rack for finished clothes. Maybe a second-hand sewing machine someday. She wrapped her fingers around the key. When can I start cleaning? Denise checked her watch. It's 7:42. So why are you still standing there? Natalie laughed. 20 minutes later, Aaliyah was carrying empty boxes toward the dumpster, while Natalie swept years of dust from the floor. Caleb sat safely near the doorway, drawing on cardboard. What is this going to be? Aaliyah asked. Natalie stopped sweeping. She looked at the tiny room. She still had no business name, no sign, no savings worth mentioning. Her hospital hours were shrinking. Her husband was gone. Her checking account remained frighteningly small. Yet for the first time since Evan had left $240 on the kitchen table, Natalie was standing inside something that belonged to her future rather than her past. I don't know yet, she said. Aaliyah smiled. Maybe you should measure it. Natalie looked at her daughter. Then she pulled the old yellow measuring tape from around her neck. Together, mother and daughter stretched it across the room. 11 feet 4 inches. Natalie wrote the number in her notebook. Aaliyah watched. What happens now? Natalie looked around at the dirty walls. Now we see what can fit. What Natalie didn't know was that within weeks she would come dangerously close to selling the one thing that made this little room useful at all. Her grandmother's sewing machine. By the middle of April, Natalie Lewis had learned how much life could fit into 24 hours. At 5:40, every morning, she woke before Aaliyah and Caleb. Breakfast, school lunches, hospital uniform, drop-offs, work, pickups, dinner. Then Harper laundry. Some nights she returned home after 10, with Caleb asleep against her shoulder and Aaliyah carrying Natalie's sewing box up the stairs. The little storage room behind the laundromat had changed too. Natalie scrubbed the walls, cleaned the window, repaired the crooked shelf, and bought a used clothing rack for $9. Aaliyah taped one of her drawings beside the door, a yellow measuring tape curled into the shape of a heart. Natalie left it there. The work was growing. So was the exhaustion. Evan called occasionally, usually for the children. Sometimes he promised to call Sunday, and didn't. Sometimes he sent money. Sometimes he explained why he couldn't. Natalie stopped planning her bills around promises. Then on a Monday morning, Caleb woke, burning with fever. Mommy, my head hurts. Natalie touched his forehead. Her stomach tightened. The thermometer read 102.4. She called the hospital. Mr. Bradley answered. My son is sick. I can't come in. There was a pause. Natalie, this is your second schedule issue this month. The first one was because daycare closed early, I understand, but we're already short. What do you want me to do? Another pause. I'm just telling you we need reliability. Natalie looked at Caleb curled beneath his dinosaur blanket. I understand. She ended the call. But she didn't. Reliability. She wanted to ask who a 5-year-old was supposed to rely on when he was sick. Instead, Natalie spent the day beside him. By evening, his fever had dropped. Then someone knocked. Natalie opened the apartment door and found an envelope pushed beneath the welcome mat. Late rent notice. She'd read it twice. The amount due made her chest tighten. Aaliyah appeared behind her. What is it? Just paperwork. Natalie placed it face down. That night after the children slept, she opened her banking app. Then the rent notice. Then her notebook of alteration income. She calculated everything. Once, twice. It still did not work. Natalie looked toward the corner of the living room. Her grandmother's sewing machine sat there beneath a cloth cover. It was old, but sturdy, built into a wooden carrying case with scratches along the edges. Lorraine had taught Natalie on that machine. When Natalie was 11, she had hated practicing straight seams. Slow hands make clean work, Lorraine would tell her. Natalie had inherited the machine after her grandmother died. Until recently, it had mostly sat unused. Now it was the reason customers came back. Natalie stared at it. Then she opened her phone. She searched used sewing machines. Similar models were selling for $150 to $250. $200 could buy time. Maybe enough to prevent another late fee. Natalie removed the cover. She cleaned the machine. Then she took several photographs. Her finger hovered over post-listing. She hated herself for hesitating. A sewing machine was an object. Rent was shelter. Children needed shelter more than memories. She typed vintage sewing machine. Good working condition. $200. Before she could post it, a small voice came from behind her. "You're selling Grandma Lorraine's—" Natalie turned. Aaliyah stood in the hallway. "You should be asleep. Why are you selling it?" Natalie lowered the phone. "We need money." For the apartment, Natalie hated how quickly her daughter understood. "I'm handling it." Aaliyah walked toward the machine. She touched the wooden case. "But you make money with this." Natalie said nothing. Aaliyah disappeared into the kitchen. A moment later she returned, carrying the old yellow measuring tape. She placed it gently on top of the sewing machine. No speech, no argument. Then she went back to bed. Natalie stared at the yellow tape. Measure twice, cut once. She looked again at the listing. Selling the machine would solve one problem today, but it would remove one of the few tools she had for tomorrow. Natalie deleted the listing. The next morning, she made a different decision. During her lunch break at the hospital, she created a simple flyer on an old computer. Alterations and repairs. School uniforms, medical scrubs, zippers. Hems. Affordable local service. She printed 20 copies. That afternoon, she asked permission to leave several near the employee break room. Most people walked past them. One did not. Her name was Angela Brooks, a nurse from the orthopedic floor. "You do scrubs?" "Yes. I ordered 6 sets online. Pants are too long. I can hem them. How much?" Natalie gave her price. Angela nodded. "When tomorrow evening?" Angela raised an eyebrow. "All 6. Natalie hesitated. "Day after tomorrow. Deal." That night, Natalie worked until 12:47. The apartment was silent except for the sewing machine. Needle down, fabric forward, needle up, measure, pin, sew. Again. The next afternoon, Angela tried on 1 pair in the hospital locker room. Perfect. She paid Natalie. Then she pointed toward 2 other nurses. "They need somebody too." Within 3 days, Natalie had 9 additional scrub alterations. The money wasn't life-changing, but it paid part of the rent shortage. More importantly, something had changed. People were referring other people. On Friday evening, Natalie entered the storage room at Harper Laundry carrying a pile of navy and burgundy scrubs. Denise looked inside. "You're busy." "Too busy." "That a complaint?" Natalie smiled. "No." Aaliyah sat at the little desk writing customer names in Natalie's notebook. "Ms. Parker, 2 pants." "Got it." "Mr. Ellis, jacket zipper." "Got it." "Angela Brooks, 3 tops." Aaliyah looked up. "Mom, yes, you need a business name." Natalie laughed. "I need sleep. You can have both, not tonight." For the first time in weeks, Natalie allowed herself to imagine that this might become more than emergency money. Maybe she could eventually earn enough to replace the hospital hours she had lost. Maybe the room could become a real alteration shop. Maybe her phone rang. The hospital. Natalie answered. "Hello, Natalie, it's Mr. Bradley." His voice was unusually careful. She stepped into the hallway. What happened? The outsourcing agreement was finalized today. Natalie leaned against the wall. Okay. There are going to be additional staffing reductions. The laundromat suddenly seemed louder. How many? I don't have every number yet, but you know mine. Silence. Natalie closed her eyes. When end of the month? Her fingers tightened around the phone. You're eliminating my position. I'm sorry. There was that sentence again. Natalie looked through the doorway. Caleb was coloring on scrap paper. Aaliyah was carefully writing customer names. Her grandmother's sewing machine moved beneath Denise's old lamp, while a half-finished pair of scrubs waited under the needle. How many weeks? 3. Natalie swallowed. Is there another department I'll check? Please don't tell me you'll check unless you actually will. Mr. Bradley paused. I will. Thank you. She ended the call. Denise looked toward her. Natalie walked back inside. What is it? Denise asked. My job. What about it? It's gone in 3 weeks. Aaliyah stopped writing. Natalie immediately smiled at her daughter. It's okay. But this time Aaliyah did not ask if they were poor. She looked at the stack of clothing beside the sewing machine. Then she looked at her mother. You still have this? Natalie followed her gaze. 3 weeks earlier, Natalie would have seen a table covered in other people's damaged clothes. Now she saw unfinished work, customers, deadlines, money she had earned herself, possibility. Natalie touched the yellow measuring tape around her neck. 3 weeks. That was all the hospital had given her. 3 weeks before the job she had considered safe disappeared completely. For the first time, however, Natalie did not ask herself. Who might save them? She opened her notebook to a blank page. At the top she wrote, What do I need to earn each week? Then she began calculating. 3 weeks later, Natalie Lewis walked out of Franklin Memorial Hospital carrying 11 years of employment in a cardboard box. It was 3:17 in the afternoon. Inside the box were her stainless steel water bottle, 2 pens, a pair of non-slip shoes, 3 family photographs, and the plastic badge that still read Natalie Lewis Food Services. She stopped beside her old Honda in the employee parking lot. Around her, nothing had changed. Nurses crossed towards the entrance drinking coffee. An ambulance turned into the emergency lane. 2 employees laughed beside a shuttle stop. Natalie had always imagined losing a job would feel dramatic. Instead, the world simply continued without her. She put the box on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel. For several minutes, she did nothing. Then she took out her notebook. Rent, electricity, daycare, groceries, gas, insurance, phone. She calculated the minimum amount required to keep the household functioning. Then she added what second measure, though she had not yet formally named it, was currently earning. The difference was frightening. If nothing changed, she had perhaps 2 weeks. Her phone rang. Denise. How'd it go? I'm officially unemployed. You coming here? Natalie looked at the hospital entrance one last time. Yeah, good. I made coffee. That usually means you want something. It means I made coffee. With you, those are the same thing. Denise laughed and hung up. 40 minutes later, Natalie entered Harper Laundry. The little room in back had become crowded with work. 2 scrub pants hung from the rack. A school blazer waited for a new button. 3 dresses were labeled with customer names. Denise handed Natalie a paper cup. Then she placed a flyer beside it. Columbus Women's Workforce Center. Small Business and Employment Development. Natalie looked at it. No, you haven't read it. I read enough. They have business workshops. I don't own a business. Denise slowly looked toward the alteration room, then back at Natalie. What would you call that a way to pay bills? People bring you problems. Natalie drank her coffee. You fix the problems. Sometimes. They pay you, usually. Denise raised an eyebrow. A business is somebody solving a problem people will pay to have solved. Natalie pushed the flyer back. Those programs are for people who understand business, so learn. I need money now, Denise. I don't need a workshop where somebody tells me to make a vision board. Denise leaned against the counter. You know what your problem is? I can think of several. You think struggling makes you too busy to learn how to stop struggling. Natalie stared at her. That sounded rehearsed. It was. I've been waiting all afternoon. Despite herself, Natalie smiled. The workshop was Thursday at 6. She went. The Columbus Women's Workforce Center occupied part of an old brick community building near Parsons Avenue. Natalie almost turned around twice. Inside the classroom, 14 people sat around folding tables. Some had laptops. Natalie had a notebook. At exactly 6, a woman walked to the front. My name is Monica Hayes. Monica was 46, sharply organized without being intimidating. She wore a navy blazer, comfortable shoes, and carried no inspirational posters. Before anyone asks, Monica said, "No, I do not have a bag of grant money under this table." Several people laughed. Natalie looked up. What I do have is information. If you want somebody to rescue your business, you're in the wrong room. If you want to understand your business, stay. Natalie stayed. The first session covered costs. Monica asked everyone to calculate what 1 hour of their work actually cost them. Natalie wrote down thread, needles, zippers, electricity, transportation. Then Monica said, "Now add your time." Natalie stopped. She had never treated her time as an expense. She charged what she thought customers would tolerate. Monica walked around the room. When she reached Natalie, she looked at the page. "What do you do, alterations?" "How much for a basic pants hem?" Natalie told her. "How long? 30 to 40 minutes. Materials?" "Not much. Travel sometimes. Administrative time?" Natalie frowned. "What administrative time? Scheduling the customer, texting them, taking payment, keeping records, buying supplies?" Natalie looked at the price she had written. Monica asked, "After all that, how much are you actually paying yourself?" Natalie calculated. The answer was embarrassing. "Not enough. That's not a number." Natalie calculated again. "About $6 an hour on some jobs." Monica nodded. "Then you don't have cheap prices. You have unsustainable prices." The words bothered Natalie all night. At home, after the children went to bed, she emptied every receipt she had saved onto the kitchen table. She organized them by date: thread, replacement zippers, buttons, gas, printer paper, machine oil. She opened the envelope marked "Mom's Fixing Money." The first $12 were still there. Natalie smiled. Then she got serious. She calculated until 12:36 a.m. For the first time, she could see the difference between money coming in and money she actually kept. It was not encouraging, but it was real. The next workshop covered pricing, then scheduling, then cash flow. Monica gave Natalie no shortcuts. When Natalie complained that customers might leave if she raised prices, Monica asked, "Can you survive if they stay?" That silenced her. Natalie gradually adjusted her rates. Not dramatically. Enough. A few customers complained. Most did not. One Friday afternoon, a man brought in 2 work jackets. Natalie gave him the price. He nodded immediately. No argument, no bargaining. Nothing. After he left, Natalie stared at the money. She had spent weeks imagining everyone would disappear the moment she valued her own labor. They hadn't. At the next workshop, Monica asked each participant to describe the problem their business solved. A baker said convenience. A woman offering child care said dependable care for working parents. When Monica reached Natalie, she answered easily, "I fix clothes." Monica waited. Natalie frowned. "What, you fix clothes?" "Yes, that's the service." Natalie waited. Monica leaned against the table. "I asked what problem you solve." "Damaged clothes, for whom anybody. That's not an answer." Natalie felt defensive. "I hem pants, replace zippers, adjust uniforms, repair seams. What else am I supposed to say?" Monica pulled out the chair opposite her. Who came to you this week? Natalie opened her notebook. A nurse who needed scrubs shortened. Why? Because they were too long. Why did that matter? She needed them for work? Who else? A mother needed a blazer taken in. For what job interview? Who else? A high school senior. What did he need? His graduation suit was too big. Monica nodded. Keep going. Natalie slowly understood where the questions were leading. A CNA starting a new job. A waitress repairing her only black work pants. A mother who could afford a thrift store jacket but not a new professional one. People came carrying clothing, but often they were really carrying something else. A first day, an interview, a graduation, a chance to appear prepared when their bank accounts said otherwise. Monica watched Natalie's face change. What problem are you really fixing? Natalie looked down at the old yellow measuring tape resting beside her notebook. I don't know. Monica smiled slightly. Good. Natalie looked up. Good people who think they already know everything don't build much. That evening, Natalie returned to Harper Laundry. A woman was waiting outside the alteration room holding a pair of navy scrubs. My friend Angela said you could help me. Natalie smiled. Let me see. The woman handed them over. I start Monday. I bought these on clearance, but they're way too long. I can't afford another pair right now. Natalie looked at the pants, then at the woman. For the first time, she heard something beneath the request. Not simply shorten these, something closer to help me walk into Monday looking like I belong there. Natalie placed the pants on her table. When do you need them, Sunday? I can do that. The woman visibly relaxed. Thank you. After she left, Natalie remained beside the table. Denise appeared in the doorway. You all right? Monica asked me something. Dangerous woman. She asked what problem I'm actually fixing. Denise looked at the rack of uniforms, jackets, dresses, and work pants. And Natalie touched the yellow measuring tape. I think I've been giving the wrong answer. That night she opened her notebook to a clean page. At the top she wrote, What are people really coming here for? Below it, Natalie began listing names. Beside each name she stopped writing what garment they had brought. Instead she wrote why they needed it. First day of work, interview, graduation, couldn't afford replacement, needed uniform, needed another chance. Natalie stared at the final words. Another chance. For months she had believed she was trying to replace the income Evan had taken from their household. Now for the first time, she wondered if the little room behind Harper Laundry could become something larger than survival. And soon it would finally have a name. The name came to Natalie Lewis at 11:38 on a Wednesday night. She was sitting at the kitchen table beneath the weak yellow light above the stove, surrounded by receipts, thread samples, and 3 garments she had promised to finish before Friday. Everyone else was asleep. In front of her lay the notebook Monica Hayes had told her to keep. At the top of one page, Natalie had written, What are people really coming here for? Underneath were the answers she had collected over 2 weeks. Job interview, first day at work, graduation, couldn't afford new clothes, needed to look professional, needed another chance. Natalie read the final line again. Another chance. Her eyes drifted toward the old yellow measuring tape beside the notebook. She remembered standing in her grandmother Lorraine's kitchen as a child, impatiently holding scissors over a piece of blue fabric. Measure twice. Cut once, Lorraine had warned. Back then, it had been about avoiding waste. Now Natalie understood the words differently. Most people who came to her could not afford to throw something away simply because it no longer fit. They had to measure again, adjust, repair, try differently. Natalie picked up her pen. She wrote 2 words. Second measure. Then she circled them. The next afternoon, she showed Denise Harper. Second measure alterations, Natalie said. Denise read the words from the notebook. I like it. You don't sound excited. I'm 58. This is excited. Natalie laughed. Denise tapped the page. Why second measure? Natalie touched the yellow tape around her neck. My grandmother. That was enough explanation. Aaliyah loved the name immediately. That evening she sat on the floor of the alteration room with markers scattered around her and began drawing possible signs. One had enormous scissors. One had a sewing machine with wings. Another had a yellow measuring tape forming the letter S. Natalie picked up that one. This? Aaliyah grinned. I knew you'd choose it. You made all three. Still new. Caleb looked up from his coloring book. Can I work here too? What can you do? Natalie asked. He considered this seriously. I can eat snacks. Position filled. For a few minutes, the little room filled with laughter. Then Natalie returned to work. Naming the business was the easy part. Making it real was harder. Monica gave her a checklist. Register the business. Open a separate account. Track expenses. Create written prices. Establish turnaround times. Keep customer records. Understand taxes. Natalie stared at the list. I thought sewing was the difficult part. Monica smiled. Sewing is your skill. Running a business is another skill. I don't have that one. Not yet. Natalie spent the next several weeks learning. She made mistakes. She forgot to record a cash payment and spent 40 minutes searching for the discrepancy. She accepted too many rush jobs one weekend and worked until 2 in the morning. She bought the wrong type of zipper in bulk because it was cheaper, then discovered she rarely used that size. Monica never fixed the mistakes for her. She made Natalie explain them. What happened? I ordered badly. Why? Because I saw a discount. And what did you learn? That cheap inventory nobody needs is expensive. Good. Natalie hated those conversations. She also never made the same mistake twice. Meanwhile, customers continued arriving. One afternoon, a woman named Mrs. Wallace brought in a charcoal blazer she had purchased for $6 at a thrift store. I have an interview Friday, she explained, but this makes me look like I borrowed my brother's jacket. Natalie smiled. Put it on. The shoulders were acceptable, but the waist was far too wide. Natalie pinned the sides. Mrs. Wallace looked at herself in the mirror. I haven't interviewed in 13 years. What kind of job receptionist at a dental office? You nervous, terrified. Natalie adjusted another pin. Good. Mrs. Wallace turned. Good. It means you care? 2 days later, she returned, wearing the finished blazer. She stood straighter before she even reached the mirror. Natalie noticed that. Clothing did not create confidence, but sometimes it removed one reason to hide. Another customer was a young nursing assistant named Brianna, who needed white scrub pants shortened before orientation. Then came 17-year-old Marcus, whose mother brought in a second-hand suit for graduation. The sleeves covered half his hands. Natalie fixed them. When Marcus returned, he stood in front of the mirror and quietly said, I look grown. His mother turned away to hide tears. Those moments answered Monica's question better than any business worksheet. Natalie was not making people new. She was helping them use what they already had to step toward something new. Second measure began appearing on small, handwritten receipts, then on appointment cards. Aaliyah's yellow measuring tape logo was printed at the top. Natalie kept one card in her wallet. She still had days when she felt ridiculous calling herself a business owner. But the card helped. One Saturday afternoon, Evan called. Aaliyah answered while Natalie was measuring a customer. Dad. Natalie continued working. Aaliyah talked excitedly about school Caleb's missing tooth and the science project she wanted to build. Then she said Mom has a business now. Natalie's hand stopped for half a second. Through the phone, she heard Evan laugh. A business? Yeah, second measure. What's that? She fixes clothes. There was another small laugh. Oh, Mom's doing sewing on the side. Aaliyah looked toward Natalie. It's not on the side. Natalie lowered her eyes to the fabric. Aaliyah continued. She has customers and everything. That's good, baby. His tone was kind. That almost made it worse. He sounded like someone praising a child's lemonade stand. Later, after the call ended, Aaliyah approached her mother. He doesn't understand. Natalie folded a pair of finished pants. He doesn't have to, but he thinks it's small. Natalie looked around the room. It was small. 11 feet 4 inches exactly. One sewing machine, one rack, one folding table, a second-hand mirror, a plastic chair. She smiled. It is small. Aaliyah frowned. That doesn't mean it isn't real. Natalie stopped. Her daughter had said it with such certainty that Natalie felt something shift inside her. No, she said quietly. It doesn't. That night after Denise locked the front doors, Natalie remained in the alteration room. She removed her old hospital apron from a hook. The plastic name badge was still clipped to it. Natalie Lewis Food Services. She ran her thumb across the letters. That job had once represented safety. Then it disappeared. Natalie removed the badge. From a drawer, she took the small fabric label Aaliyah had designed. Second measure. The yellow measuring tape curved beneath the words. Natalie threaded a needle. Slowly, she stitched the label onto the apron. When she finished, Denise was standing in the doorway. Looks official. Natalie smiled. Feels terrifying. Usually how you know something matters. Natalie hung the apron back up. Her phone buzzed. A new message. For a moment, she assumed it was another customer. It was Evan. Glad the sewing thing is working out. Still think you should look for something steady with benefits. Just thinking about the kids. Natalie read it twice. Months earlier, those words would have made her furious. Now they only showed her how little Evan knew about the life she was building. She did not defend herself. She did not send pictures of the customer rack. She did not tell him how many orders were waiting. She typed only, "The kids are taken care of." Then she put the phone away. Denise glanced at her. Everything okay? Yes. Natalie turned off the sewing machine. Then she looked at the yellow tape around her neck. Measured twice. Denise smiled. Cut once. Natalie shook her head slightly. Not tonight. She turned off the light. Over the next month, second measure continued growing, not because anyone handed Natalie a miracle, but because one customer told another. And then on a rainy afternoon, a woman named Keisha Morgan would walk through the door carrying a thrift store suit $9 and a problem that would change what Natalie believed. Keisha Morgan walked into second measure on a rainy Thursday afternoon carrying a gray suit inside a wrinkled grocery bag. Natalie Lewis noticed the shoes first. Clean black flats worn almost white around the edges. Keisha was 39 with tired eyes and the careful posture of someone trying not to take up too much space. A little girl waited beside her holding a purple backpack. Are you Natalie? Yes. Someone at the workforce center gave me your name. Keisha removed the suit from the bag. I need this fixed. Natalie held up the jacket. It was good quality, but at least 2 sizes too large. When do you need it? Keisha hesitated. Saturday morning. Natalie looked at the clock. Thursday, 3:42 p.m. That's tight? I know. What's Saturday interview? The answer changed the conversation. Natalie asked Keisha to put the jacket on. The shoulders were manageable, but the waist needed reshaping, and the sleeves were too long. The pants needed hemming and taking in. Natalie pinned the jacket. What kind of interview? Billing assistant? Medical supply company? Good job if I get it. Natalie finished measuring. I can have it ready tomorrow evening. Keisha exhaled. Thank you. Natalie wrote the price on a small appointment card. Keisha looked at it. Then her face changed. Not dramatically. That made it worse. She opened her wallet. Inside were a driver's license, 2 receipts, and a few folded bills. I have $9. Natalie remained silent. I thought it would be cheaper. Keisha quickly began removing the jacket. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have wasted your time. You didn't. I can figure something else out. Natalie looked at the little girl with the purple backpack. For a second, she saw Aaliyah. Then she remembered the night she had counted $240 into 4 envelopes. She could simply do the work for free. But Monica's warning returned. Kindness without structure could destroy the person giving it. Natalie had rent too, children too, bills too. She asked, "What did you do before Keisha stopped? Before what? Before you needed the suit?" A defensive look appeared in Keisha's eyes. Natalie softened her voice. "I mean work. Bookkeeping." Natalie blinked. "Seriously. Accounts payable mostly. 7 years." Natalie glanced toward her desk. Receipts filled 2 folders. Customer payments were written across 3 notebook pages. Monica had been telling her for weeks that her records were a mess. "How are you with spreadsheets?" Keisha almost smiled. "Better than I am with sewing." Natalie removed the pins from her mouth. "I have a proposition." 20 minutes later, Keisha sat at Natalie's desk while her daughter colored beside Aaliyah. Natalie placed a stack of receipts in front of her. "You helped me organize 3 hours of this. I altered the suit." Keisha looked suspicious. "You're serious?" "Very." "Why?" "Because I need something you know how to do, and you need something I know how to do." Keisha stared at her. "That's it? That's it? No charity? No." Keisha slowly nodded. "Deal." What Natalie expected to take 3 hours took Keisha 90 minutes. She separated business expenses, created categories, identified missing receipts, and showed Natalie that several customer payments had never been properly recorded. "You need separate records for cash and electronic payments," Keisha said. Natalie stared at the screen. "I thought I had separate records. You have separate piles." "That's different, very." Natalie laughed. For the first time, Keisha did too. By 8:15 that night, the laundromat had emptied. Keisha's daughter slept beside Aaliyah, while Natalie worked on the gray suit. The sewing machine hummed steadily. Measure, pin, cut, sew. Keisha watched from the desk. "My daughter and I were at a transitional shelter until last month," she said suddenly. Natalie did not stop sewing. "You don't have to explain." "I know." Keisha looked toward her sleeping daughter. "My husband died 3 years ago. After that, everything went wrong slowly. That's the part people don't understand." Natalie listened. "It wasn't one big disaster. First I missed work. Then I lost the job. Then rent got behind. Then the car." She shook her head. "By the time people see you struggling, they think you made one stupid decision." Natalie understood that better than she wanted to. "Sometimes it's 50 small things." "Exactly." Keisha looked at the suit. "I bought that for $14. Natalie smiled. "Good find. It was the best I could do. No shame in that." "I know." Keisha paused. "I'm trying to know." Natalie looked at her then. There was a difference. The next evening, Keisha returned. Natalie handed her the finished suit. "Try it." Keisha stepped behind the curtain. When she emerged, her daughter's mouth opened. Mommy Keisha turned toward the mirror. The jacket now followed her shape cleanly. The sleeves ended correctly at her wrists. The pants fell neatly over her shoes. For several seconds, Keisha said nothing. Then she straightened her shoulders. "I look like I have the job already." Natalie smiled. "Now go convince them." Saturday passed. Then Sunday. Natalie wondered about the interview but did not call. Monday afternoon, the door opened. Keisha walked in. She was wearing the gray suit. Natalie immediately stood. Well, Keisha tried to keep a straight face. It lasted 2 seconds. "I start next Monday." Aaliyah cheered from the corner. Natalie hugged Keisha. "I knew it." "No, you didn't." "Fine," I hoped aggressively. Keisha laughed. Then she opened her purse. She placed several bills on the table. Natalie frowned. "What's this, the rest? You already paid. I worked for part of it. That was the agreement. And now I can pay the rest." Natalie pushed the money back. "Keep it." Keisha pushed it toward her again. "Take it. You need it more than I do." Keisha's expression changed. "Please don't do that." Natalie stopped. "I don't want to be remembered as the woman who couldn't afford your price." Natalie looked at her. "I want to be a customer who paid what your work was worth." The words landed hard. Natalie slowly took the money. Okay. Keisha smiled. Thank you. After she left, Natalie sat alone for several minutes. Denise entered carrying coffee. You look like somebody just explained your own business to you. Maybe she did? That evening, Natalie called Monica. I have an idea. That sentence usually costs money. What if people who can't afford alterations could exchange useful skills? Monica was quiet. Natalie continued. Bookkeeping, inventory, cleaning, administrative work, maybe other things. And when someone has no skill you need, I don't know yet. And who decides what an hour of their labor is worth? Natalie stopped. I don't know. What happens when you have 10 people who need help and only enough paid work for 3? I don't know. Monica's voice softened. Then you have an idea, not a system. Natalie sighed. I knew you'd say that. Good. Because the idea is strong. Natalie sat straighter. It is, yes. But don't build generosity in a way that depends on you exhausting yourself. Natalie looked toward the sewing machine. So what do I do? Build structure. Over the following weeks, Natalie and Monica began sketching something simple. Discounted alterations tied to community work. Skill exchanges when appropriate. Clear hourly values. No pity. No vague promises. And whenever possible, paid work, rather than unpaid favors. Keisha began stopping by after her new job, helping Natalie organize the financial side. One evening, Aaliyah watched the two women arguing over a spreadsheet. Is Miss Keisha your employee? Natalie laughed. No. Keisha looked up. Not yet. Everyone went quiet. Then Keisha smiled. Natalie did too. Something was happening inside Second Measure. Something larger than sewing. Natalie had started this business because she needed to survive. Now she was beginning to understand that survival could become a doorway, not only for her, but for someone coming behind her. And soon Evan Lewis would return to Columbus and see the little room behind Harper Laundry. He would look directly at what Natalie was building and completely misunderstand it. Evan Lewis returned to Columbus on a Saturday morning in early June. Natalie knew he was coming because he had texted 3 days earlier. I want to see the kids. I'll pick them up Saturday at 11. No apology. No question about what the previous months had been like. Natalie replied with the address of Harper Laundry. At 10:56, a dark blue SUV pulled into the parking lot. Aaliyah saw it through the window. Dad Caleb dropped his crayons and ran toward the door. Natalie followed more slowly. Evan stepped from the SUV, wearing a fitted gray Polo new watch and polished shoes. He looked healthier, more confident. For one painful second, Natalie remembered the man she had married. Then Caleb crashed into him. Dad Evan lifted him. Look at you! Aaliyah hugged him next. Natalie stayed several feet away. Hey, Nat. Evan. His eyes moved past her toward the laundromat. So this is where you work now, part of it. He followed her inside. Natalie's alteration room was busy. 3 garment bags hung from the rack. A pair of medical scrubs waited beside the machine. Keisha had left organized invoices on the desk. Evan looked around. This is the sewing thing, Second Measure. Right. He nodded as though trying to be supportive. It's nice. Natalie recognized the tone. Nice meant small, temporary. Something she was doing until real life resumed. Caleb pulled Evan toward a drawing taped to the wall. I made that. Evan praised him. Then he noticed the old yellow measuring tape around Natalie's neck. You still have that thing my grandmother's... Yeah? Of course. Evan smiled. You never throw anything away. The comment was harmless to him. To Natalie, it sounded different now. No, she said. Sometimes things are worth repairing. Evan did not notice the meaning. He checked his watch. I thought I'd take the kids to lunch, maybe the zoo. That's fine. Back by 6. 7 sick. He looked at her. Natalie. I drove from Indianapolis, and Caleb's bedtime is 8. A small silence passed between them. Months earlier, Natalie might have softened the boundary to avoid conflict. Now she simply waited. 6, Evan said. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket. "I brought something." He handed her an envelope. Natalie opened it. Cash. Several $100s. "This is for you. For me to help." Natalie looked up. "Is this child support?" Evan's expression tightened. "Why do you have to call it that? Because if it's for Aaliyah and Caleb, that's what it is. I'm trying to do something decent. Then do it consistently." He lowered his voice. "I came here to have a good day. So have one." Natalie handed the envelope back. "If this is for the children, I'll take it. If it's supposed to make me feel like you're rescuing me, keep it." Evan stared at her. Eventually, he pushed the envelope toward her again. "For the kids." Natalie accepted it. "Thank you." That unsettled him more than anger would have. As the children collected their jackets, Evan glanced toward Natalie's desk. A printed schedule listed customer appointments nearly every hour. "You're pretty busy." "Yes." "You making enough from this? I'm getting there." He nodded. "You know I could ask around. Maybe there are hospital jobs in Indianapolis." Natalie looked at him. "I live in Columbus. I mean, eventually. Something steady. Benefits. I have work. I know, I just mean a real job." The room became quiet. Natalie could have shown him the records. She could have told him about Keisha Monica, the growing customer list, or the plans she was developing. Instead, she realized she no longer needed Evan to understand. She touched the measuring tape. "Measure twice." Evan frowned. "What nothing?" He laughed. "That grandmother saying yes. You always took that stuff too seriously." Natalie smiled faintly. "Maybe." Then she opened the door for him. 6 o'clock. After they left, Denise appeared from behind a row of dryers. "You okay? I'm fine. He still thinks you're waiting to be rescued." Natalie returned to her sewing machine. That's his problem. At 5:58, Evan brought the children back. Caleb carried a stuffed giraffe from the zoo. Aaliyah had cotton candy stains on her sleeve. They were happy. Natalie was grateful for that. Evan stood outside while the children went inside. They had fun. "Good." He hesitated. "You've changed." Natalie looked at him. "No." He seemed surprised. "I think I just stopped asking permission to be who I already was." Evan had no answer. He walked toward his SUV. Before getting inside, he turned. "Think about the job thing. Okay, sewing's fine, but you've got 2 kids. You need something secure." Natalie looked through the laundromat window, at her sewing machine, at the rack of finished clothes, at Aaliyah helping Caleb remove his jacket. Security? She once thought it meant a paycheck someone else could eliminate, or a husband who promised to stay. Now she was learning another definition. "I'll think about what's best for us," she said. Evan nodded and drove away. He left Columbus still believing Natalie was barely surviving in a tiny room behind a laundromat. He had no idea that within months Second Measure would move beyond those 11 feet and 4 inches. And the next store Natalie opened would have her own name on it. The first storefront Natalie Lewis could afford had a stained ceiling, cracked floor tiles, and a front window covered with the ghostly outlines of letters from a business that had closed years earlier. Natalie loved it immediately. "It's ugly," Aaliyah said. "It has potential. The ceiling is brown. Character. It smells weird." Natalie looked toward the landlord. "We'll discuss that." The narrow storefront stood 2 blocks from Harper Laundry. It wasn't glamorous, but it had enough space for 3 sewing stations, a fitting area storage, and a small desk. Most importantly, it had a front door. Natalie imagined Second Measure across the glass. Then she looked at the rent. Her excitement disappeared. That evening, she sat with Monica Hayes and Keisha Morgan going through the numbers. "You can technically afford it," Keisha said. "Technically sounds dangerous." "It is." Monica pointed at their spreadsheet. "You need consistent monthly revenue, not one good month." Natalie studied the figures. 6 months earlier, she would have signed the lease because she was desperate to prove she was moving forward. Now she waited. Measure twice. For 3 more weeks, she tracked every appointment expense and payment. Then she returned to the storefront and signed. Denise was the first person Natalie told. "I'm moving out." Denise looked offended. "After everything I've done for you," Natalie froze. Then Denise smiled. "Took you long enough?" Natalie laughed and hugged her. "I wouldn't have gotten here without you." "Don't start. I mean it." Denise stepped back. "I gave you 11 feet of dirty storage room. You gave me somewhere to begin." Denise shook her head. "No, I gave you a room. You turned it into something useful. That distinction mattered." Denise did not give Natalie money for the new shop. Instead, she gave her something earned over years. Trust. She told regular customers where Natalie was moving. Some booked appointments before the new shop even opened. On opening morning, Aaliyah taped her original yellow measuring tape drawing behind the front desk. Caleb stood outside, staring at the hand-painted sign. "Second measure alterations. Mom, yes, are we rich now?" Natalie laughed. "No, still very much still," he sighed. "Business takes forever. It does." But Natalie was no longer trying to become rich. She was trying to become stable. Keisha began helping with bookkeeping several evenings a week. This time Natalie insisted on paying her. "You don't need to do that," Keisha said. "Yes, I do. You helped me when I couldn't pay. That doesn't mean your work is free forever." Keisha smiled. "Fine." Soon Natalie needed another pair of hands. Her first apprentice was 26-year-old Jasmine Price, a single mother, referred through Monica's workforce program. Jasmine knew basic sewing, but had never worked professionally. During her first week, she ruined a zipper installation and nearly cried. "I'll pay for it," Jasmine said. "No, but I messed it up, so fix it. I don't know how." Natalie pulled over a chair. "Then today you learn." They removed the zipper together, slowly, carefully. Natalie showed her how to correct the damaged seam without ruining the jacket. When they finished, Jasmine stared at it. "You can't even tell." "That's the point." Natalie handed her the yellow measuring tape. Again. For the first time, Natalie understood that teaching someone felt different from doing the work herself. Second measure was becoming more than her hands. Then an unexpected opportunity arrived. Monica entered the shop one afternoon carrying a folder. "I have somebody who wants to meet you." Natalie looked suspicious. "Why?" "Because people are talking." "That sounds bad." "Not this time." The Columbus Career Renewal Network collected professional clothing for people returning to work. There was one problem. Much of the donated clothing didn't fit the people who needed it. "They give somebody a suit," Monica explained, "but the sleeves are 6 inches too long, or the pants don't fit. Then the person still has to spend money they don't have." Natalie understood immediately. "What do they want from me, alterations? I can do alterations. There's more." The organization wanted to test a small training program. Instead of simply paying second measure to repair clothes, Natalie would train several women referred through workforce services. "Paid apprenticeships." Natalie stared at Monica. "How many 3 to start?" "I have 1 apprentice and I'm already behind." "Then say no." Natalie looked at her. I think you should decide based on capacity, not fear." That night, Natalie stayed after closing. She stood alone between the sewing stations. 6 months earlier, she had been counting $240 on a kitchen table. Now someone was asking whether she could train other women to earn money using the skill that had kept her own family afloat. It felt too large. She called Monica. "I don't feel ready." "You keep waiting to feel ready. What if I fail, you might." "That's your encouragement." "No. This is failure isn't the same thing as being incapable." Natalie was quiet. Monica continued. "Maybe ready happens after you say yes." Natalie looked at the yellow tape hanging from her neck. She measured the room with her eyes. 3 stations, storage space, 1 large cutting table. Not much, but enough to begin. The next morning, Natalie signed the pilot agreement. Not because she believed she could save 3 women. That wasn't her job. She would give them training, Tools, paid work, a place to practice. What they built afterward would belong to them. Natalie placed the signed agreement inside the desk. Aaliyah entered, carrying her backpack. What was that? A contract. Is that good? Natalie looked around second measure. I think it means we're about to get very busy. She was right. Within weeks, the shop would be fuller, louder, and more difficult than anything Natalie had managed before. And somewhere in that chaos, a photographer would capture one ordinary moment that would eventually place Natalie Lewis 30 feet above East Broad Street. By the third week of the pilot program, second measure no longer sounded like a quiet alteration shop. It sounded like work. 3 sewing machines ran at once. Scissors opened and closed against the cutting table. Steam hissed from the iron in the back. Someone was always asking where the navy thread had gone. Natalie Lewis stood in the middle of it all, with the yellow measuring tape around her neck. Not that seam Jasmine. Jasmine Price froze. This one. The inside seam. Oh. At the next machine, 32-year-old Rochelle Davis was fighting with a blazer sleeve. Across from her, 41-year-old Candace Miller practiced pinning trousers on a mannequin. All 3 women were being paid through the Columbus Career Renewal Network's pilot program. Natalie had insisted on that. She remembered too clearly what it felt like when people assumed desperation made someone's labor cheap. The first 2 weeks had gone well. The third nearly broke her. On Tuesday morning, second measure received 86 donated garments that needed to be inspected, repaired, altered, or rejected before a workforce event on Friday. Natalie accepted the deadline. Then 3 regular customers arrived with rush orders. Then the iron stopped heating. Then Rochelle incorrectly marked 6 pairs of trousers. By Wednesday afternoon, Natalie was doing what she had always done when frightened. Everything. She inspected every garment, answered every call, corrected every seam, handled every customer, rechecked Keisha's inventory list. At 6:40 p.m., Keisha closed the laptop. Natalie, give me a second. You said that 20 minutes ago. I need to finish this jacket. You also need to go home. I can't. Aaliyah and Caleb were with Denise eating dinner in the laundromat office. Keisha folded her arms. You hired and trained people, then took all their work back. I'm making sure it's right. No, you're making sure you're exhausted. Natalie looked up. If we miss Friday, they won't renew the program. Maybe. I can't risk that. Keisha lowered her voice. You know what I suspect you're about to tell me. You still think everything disappears if you stop holding it for 5 minutes. Natalie's hands became still. Keisha immediately knew she had touched something deeper. Evan, the hospital, rent, security. Natalie looked toward the 3 sewing stations. I have 2 children depending on this. And now 3 women depending on you to actually teach them. Natalie exhaled. What do you suggest? Let them work. The next morning, Natalie changed the system. Rochelle handled basic hems. Candace inspected donated garments and marked repairs. Jasmine managed zippers and simple seam work. Keisha tracked completed pieces. Natalie performed final quality control and handled complex alterations. At first, every instinct told her to intervene. She resisted. By Thursday night, 79 garments were complete. The remaining 7 were finished Friday morning. The order went out on time. Rochelle looked at the empty rack. We did that. Natalie smiled. We did. That word felt important. Second measure was no longer simply Natalie working faster. It was becoming a place where other people learned to stand on their own. Aaliyah noticed, too. One afternoon, one of her classmates came into the shop with her mother. The girl pointed toward Natalie. Is that your mom? Aaliyah nodded proudly. She owns this place. What does she do? Aaliyah thought about it, then said she fixes things people thought were useless. Natalie heard her from across the room. She stopped pinning a skirt. The word struck somewhere deep, because Aaliyah was talking about clothing. But Natalie knew she was also talking about people, maybe even about her. 2 days later, Monica arrived with 4 strangers. One carried lights, another carried a camera. Natalie immediately frowned. What is this? Career Renewal is creating a public awareness campaign, and they want photographs of the program. Natalie pointed toward the apprentices. Great, photograph them. The photographer, a black man named Aaron Blake, smiled. We will. Good. Natalie returned to work. For the next hour, Aaron photographed Rochelle measuring trousers, Candace organizing professional clothing, Jasmine working at the sewing machine, and Keisha reviewing invoices. Every time the camera turned toward Natalie, she found somewhere else to be. Finally, Keisha cornered her beside the supply cabinet. You know he needs pictures of you too. He has plenty of people. You started the program, with everybody else. Keisha nodded. Yes, including you. Natalie shook her head. I don't want this becoming one of those stories. What stories? Poor abandoned woman struggles, somebody helps her, now everybody claps. Keisha studied her. Then don't tell it that way. Natalie laughed quietly. You think I control that you control more than you used to. Before Natalie could answer, Jasmine called from the fitting area. Natalie, can you check this sleeve? Natalie walked over. A young apprentice from another workforce program stood wearing a navy blazer. One sleeve was almost an inch longer than the other. Natalie pulled the yellow measuring tape from around her neck. Relax your shoulders. The woman did. Natalie measured from the shoulder seam to the wrist. 23 3/4. She checked again. Same. Jasmine smiled. Measure twice. Always. Natalie bent slightly and marked the new sleeve length with tailor's chalk. Behind her came the soft click of a camera shutter. Natalie looked over. Aaron lowered the camera. You took my picture. I did. I wasn't ready. That's why it worked. Natalie shook her head. No posing. No posing. Can I see it? Aaron turned the camera. Natalie looked at the screen. For several seconds, she said nothing. She barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, because she looked certain. She stood beside the apprentice with one hand holding the sleeve and the yellow measuring tape falling across her dark apron. Jasmine was visible behind her, watching carefully. There was no glamour, no staged smile, just work. It's me, Natalie asked. Aaron smiled. That's what cameras do. No, I mean... She stopped. Keisha appeared behind her. That's what everybody else has been seeing. Natalie handed the camera back. The campaign team left later that afternoon. Natalie assumed that was the end of it. She returned to customers' deadlines, dinner homework, laundry invoices, and the 100 ordinary responsibilities that had built her life. 3 weeks later, Monica walked into Second Measure, carrying a large envelope. She placed it on Natalie's cutting table. What's this something you need to see? Natalie opened it. Inside was a printed campaign mock-up. Her own face looked back at her. The photograph Aaron had taken filled most of the page. The yellow measuring tape was clearly visible. Natalie stared at Monica. No. Monica remained calm. They want you as the central image. No. Natalie, I said no. Keisha looked up from the desk. Natalie read the draft beneath the photograph. It mentioned hardship, abandonment, a struggling mother, being given a second chance. Her expression hardened. This isn't my story. Monica nodded slowly. That's why I brought it here before anything was approved? Natalie looked again at the photograph. For months she had fought to stop other people from deciding what her labor was worth. Now someone else was about to decide what her life meant. She folded the mock-up. If they want my face, Natalie said, then they're going to tell the truth. Monica looked at her. And what's the truth? Natalie touched the old yellow measuring tape around her neck. That nobody rescued me. The next meeting would determine whether Natalie's photograph disappeared completely or became the image Evan Lewis would see towering above Columbus months later. Natalie Lewis arrived at the Columbus Career Renewal Network office the following Monday, carrying the campaign mock-up folded inside a manila folder. She had read it 7 times. Every time the same words bothered her. Abandoned, struggling, rescued, second chance. None of those words was entirely false. Together, however, they created a woman Natalie did not recognize. A victim waiting for someone else to change her life. Monica Hayes was already in the conference room when Natalie entered. Aaron Blake, the photographer, sat beside two campaign coordinators. "Thanks for coming," Monica said. Natalie placed the folder on the table. "I almost didn't." One coordinator, Rachel Bennett, nodded. "We understand you have concerns. I have conditions." Rachel opened her notebook. Natalie unfolded the mock-up. "My husband leaving is not the story." Rachel hesitated. "It does explain the hardship. It explains one thing that happened to me." Natalie tapped the page. "It doesn't explain what I built afterward." Nobody interrupted. "Second, my children are not marketing material. No pictures of Aaliyah or Caleb. No language about hungry kids or a desperate mother trying to survive." Rachel crossed out something in her notes. And third, Natalie looked at the sentence describing her as having been rescued through community assistance. "Take that out. The program did support you." "Yes. Monica taught me pricing. Denise gave me a room in exchange for work. Keisha helped organize my books. Customers trusted me. I had help." Natalie paused. "But help and rescue aren't the same thing." Monica smiled faintly. Natalie continued, "If you tell women they're waiting for somebody to save them, what are you advertising?" The room became quiet. Rachel leaned back. "What would you say instead?" Natalie thought about it. "Opportunity. Explain. Give somebody a tool. Teach them something. Pay them fairly. Open a door." She looked around the table. "Then let them walk through it themselves." Aaron watched her carefully. "That sounds more like the woman I photographed." Natalie glanced at him. "I still don't like that picture. You stared at it for 5 minutes. I was evaluating it." "Sure," even Natalie smiled. The meeting continued for nearly an hour. For the first time in her life, Natalie was being asked not merely what had happened to her, but what it meant. Rachel asked why she had named the business Second Measure. Natalie removed the yellow measuring tape from around her neck and placed it on the table. "My grandmother taught me to sew." "What did she teach you? Measure twice, cut once." Rachel wrote it down. Natalie continued. "When we didn't have much money, Grandma Lorraine repaired everything. Dresses, curtains, school clothes. She hated waste." Natalie ran her thumb along the faded numbers. "I used to think repairing something meant you couldn't afford something new." And now Natalie looked toward Monica. "Now I think new is overrated." The others laughed softly, but Natalie remained thoughtful. "People throw away clothes because of one tear. Sometimes we do that with people too." Aaron lowered his pen. Natalie continued. "A woman loses a job, and suddenly she's unemployed instead of experienced. She goes into a shelter, and people see homelessness before they see what she knows how to do. A marriage ends, and suddenly somebody calls you abandoned, like that's your whole identity." She stopped. Her own words had surprised her. Rachel asked quietly, "So what is Second Measure?" Natalie looked through the conference room window at traffic moving below. It's looking at what remains before deciding something has no value. The room stayed silent. Then Natalie added almost to herself, "What's left can still become something beautiful." Aaron immediately looked toward Rachel. Rachel had already written it down. Natalie noticed. "Don't make that sound cheesy." "We won't, I mean it." Monica smiled. "She means it." 2 weeks later, Natalie received the revised campaign. No mention of Evan, no photograph of her children, no language about being rescued. Instead, the campaign focused on paid apprenticeships, workforce re-entry, clothing restoration, and practical skills. Beneath Natalie's photograph appeared one sentence, "What's left can still become something beautiful." Natalie stared at it. This time she did not feel reduced. She felt represented. Then she saw the distribution plan. Bus shelters, community centers, transit posters, and one billboard. Natalie nearly dropped the paper. "A billboard?" Monica nodded. "No, you already approved the photograph. I approved a campaign. I didn't approve being 40 feet tall. 32, that's supposed to help. Keisha laughed from behind the desk. Aaliyah grabbed the mock-up. My mom is going to be on a billboard, apparently. Can we go see it? It's not even up yet. When Natalie pointed at Monica, ask the woman who ruined my quiet life. Monica smiled. 3 weeks. That evening, Aaliyah sat beside Natalie on the sofa, studying the digital Billboard preview on the laptop. Mom, yes, you look famous. I'm not famous. You're going to be giant, unfortunately. Aaliyah zoomed in. The photograph showed Natalie measuring an apprentice's sleeve. The old yellow tape rested around her neck. You kept Grandma Lorraine's tape. Of course. Do you think Dad will see it? Natalie became still. She had not considered that. Or perhaps she had refused to. I don't know. What would he say? Natalie closed the laptop. It doesn't matter. Aaliyah studied her mother. Really, Natalie thought about the question. Months earlier, she had imagined Evan seeing Second Measure differently. She had wanted him to understand that he had underestimated her. But somewhere between the laundromat, Keisha's $9 suit, Jasmine's first repaired zipper, and the workforce contract that desire had faded, Evan's opinion had become irrelevant to the value of what she was building. Really, Natalie said. 3 weeks later, the billboard went up on East Broad Street. Natalie did not attend. She had 7 customer appointments that morning. At 7:18 a.m., she was already inside Second Measure, drinking coffee while reviewing the day's work. Across town, traffic stopped at a red light. Evan Lewis sat behind the wheel of his SUV. He rubbed tiredness from his eyes and glanced toward the intersection. Then he saw her. Natalie. 32 feet above the street. For several seconds, Evan forgot the light. He forgot the cars behind him. He forgot the meeting he was driving toward. His eyes fixed on the yellow measuring tape around her neck. He knew that tape. He remembered it lying across 4 envelopes on their kitchen table. He remembered the $240. He remembered closing the apartment door. A horn sounded behind him. Then another. Evan barely heard them. He read the words beneath Natalie's face. What's left can still become something beautiful. The light turned green. Evan remained motionless. Because for the first time since leaving Columbus, he understood that something had happened without him, something large enough to put Natalie's face above the city. And he had absolutely no idea what it was. The first horn sounded at 7:18 a.m. The second lasted longer. Evan Lewis finally noticed the traffic light had turned green. He drove through the intersection slowly, but his eyes kept returning to the rearview mirror. Natalie's face disappeared behind the buildings. For the next mile, he tried to explain it away. Maybe the workforce organization had simply needed a model. Maybe someone had heard her story and chosen her for a photograph. Maybe Second Measure was still the tiny operation behind Harper Laundry, and the billboard made it look bigger than it was. At the next red light, Evan reached for his phone. He typed Second Measure Columbus, Ohio. The results appeared immediately. Second Measure alterations, workforce partnership, paid apprenticeship pilot, professional clothing restoration program. A photograph showed Natalie standing outside a storefront beneath a modest hand-painted sign. Beside her were Keisha Morgan, Jasmine Price, Monica Hayes, and several women Evan did not recognize. He opened another result. The article described how donated professional clothing was being repaired and altered for people returning to work. Another explained that trainees were being paid while learning alteration skills. Evan stopped reading. A car behind him honked. The light was green again. Damn it! He put the phone down. But the billboard followed him mentally all morning. At 10:26, he canceled his lunch appointment. At 11:14, he was driving toward the address listed for Second Measure. He expected something polished. Maybe a renovated studio with expensive equipment. Maybe the kind of place that explained a billboard. Instead, he found a narrow storefront between a tax office and a small bakery. Second Measure alterations was painted across the window. Evan parked across the street. For several minutes, he remained inside the SUV. Through the glass, he could see people moving. Natalie stood near a fitting platform. The yellow measuring tape hung around her neck. She was laughing with a customer. Evan realized he had not seen her laugh like that in years. He crossed the street. A bell sounded when he opened the door. Natalie looked up. Her expression changed only slightly. Evan. Hey. Behind her, 6 sewing machines occupied 2 rows of workstations. Garments hung from rolling racks. A large cutting table stood in the center. Keisha sat behind a desk reviewing invoices. Jasmine was showing another woman how to pin a trouser hem. There were no marble floors, no expensive furniture, no glamorous sign of sudden wealth. The coffee came from a cheap machine in the corner. One chair had duct tape beneath the cushion. Evan looked around. This is yours. Natalie folded the jacket in front of her. Yes. I saw the billboard. I figured you might eventually. You knew it was going up, yes. He waited for more. Natalie turned toward Jasmine. Give me 5 minutes. Then she led Evan towards the back. What happened? Natalie frowned. What do you mean, all this? He gestured toward the shop. When did this happen gradually? But the last time I came here you were working in Denise's laundromat. That was months ago. I know, but... He stopped. The truth was uncomfortable. He had not asked. He had called the children sent money inconsistently visited when convenient and assumed Natalie's life remained approximately where he had left it. What exactly is this? He asked. An alteration business. I can see that. Then why are you asking the Billboard to program all those women? Natalie understood. You think something happened. Something obviously happened. Yes. What? Natalie looked through the glass partition. Work. Evan gave a confused laugh. Come on, Nat. That's the answer. She pointed toward the room. Customers came. I repaired their clothes. Denise gave me space in exchange for work. Monica taught me how to price properly. Keisha helped me organize the books. We moved here. The workforce organization offered a pilot contract. I trained people. She shrugged. Then they made a campaign. Evan stared at her. That's it. What were you expecting? I don't know. An investor. A lucky break. Someone wealthy discovering her. Anything that could compress the story into one dramatic moment. Natalie smiled slightly. There wasn't one. That answer unsettled him. Because luck would have been easier to understand. Luck would have protected his memory of Natalie as the woman he had left behind with $240. Work meant something else. It meant she had built this while he was absent. A woman entered carrying 2 garment bags. Morning, Natalie. Morning, Mrs. Collins. Keisha has your invoice. Another customer waved through the window. Then Jasmine approached. Sorry, Candace needs you to check the green dress. I'll be there. Evan watched them. They work for you with me. You pay all of them? Yes. He looked genuinely surprised. Natalie noticed. What, nothing? No, say it. I just didn't realize it was this big. Natalie glanced around. It's not big. It looks big to me. That's because the last version you saw was 11 feet wide. Evan looked toward the yellow measuring tape. For the first time, he remembered the conversation from his previous visit. Measure twice? He had laughed. Now the phrase did not seem funny. His eyes moved to a shelf near Natalie's desk. There was a white envelope inside a small, clear box. Written across it in faded blue marker were the words, Mom's fixing money. What's that? Natalie followed his gaze. Aaliyah made it. When after my first paying alteration, how much, $12? Evan looked at her. 12? Natalie nodded. A woman paid me to repair a blazer, and you kept it, the first $12. Yes. Why Natalie thought of Denise. Proof. Proof of what? That I could earn money doing something I knew how to do. Evan said nothing. He remembered leaving $240 on the kitchen table, as though it were a meaningful contribution. He had imagined Natalie counting it down until desperation forced her to call him. Instead, somewhere inside those first weeks, she had protected $12, because $12 represented something his $240 never could. Possibility. Why didn't you tell me? Natalie looked almost amused. You never asked. That sentence landed harder than anger. Evan turned toward the shop. He watched Jasmine help an apprentice. Keisha answered a phone call. A woman emerged from the fitting room wearing a navy suit, smiling at herself in the mirror. Natalie had built a world here, and he was a visitor. "I thought you were struggling," he said quietly. "I was. I thought you needed help." "I did, but—" Natalie finished the thought. "You thought that meant I needed you." Evan looked at her. She did not say it cruelly. That made it worse. Aaliyah's drawing still hung behind the desk, the yellow measuring tape curved into a heart. Evan stared at it. He finally understood what had disturbed him about the billboard. It was not that Natalie had succeeded. It was that her success had nothing to do with proving him wrong. She had simply continued after he left. Natalie checked the clock. "I have customers." Evan nodded. "Right." He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned. "Nat?" "Yes, I'm proud of you." Natalie held his gaze. "Thank you." He had expected those words to matter more. They didn't. Outside, Evan stood on the sidewalk. Several blocks away, the billboard was visible above the buildings. For the first time, it looked almost unimportant. The photograph was only 32 feet of printed material. The real story was inside the modest storefront behind him. 6 sewing machines, old tables, cheap coffee, a $12 envelope, and hundreds of hours Evan had never witnessed. He had spent a year believing Natalie's life began falling apart the night he left. Now he understood something much harder to accept. Her life had begun reorganizing itself, without him. But Evan still carried one comforting interpretation that perhaps leaving had somehow pushed Natalie toward becoming stronger. When he finally said that aloud, Natalie would make sure he understood the difference between causing someone's wound and taking credit for how they healed. Evan Lewis returned to Second Measure 3 days later. This time he did not arrive unannounced. He texted Natalie first. "Can we talk?" "Not about getting back together. I just need to say some things correctly." Natalie read the message twice before replying. After closing. 6:30. At 6:34 that evening, Evan sat across from her at the cutting table. The shop felt different without customers. Machines were silent. Finished garments hung beneath clear plastic covers. Outside headlights passed across the front window. Natalie placed 2 paper cups of coffee on the table. Evan looked at his. "You still drink it black?" "When I'm tired." So always Natalie almost smiled, pretty much. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evan exhaled. "I owe you an apology." Natalie waited. "I handled everything wrong. That's broad, I know." He looked down. "I was scared." Natalie said nothing. Evan rubbed his palms together. "When commissions dropped, I started feeling like every bill was proof I'd failed. The apartment, the car, the credit cards. Everything. You weren't the only one paying them. I know that now. You knew it then." Evan accepted the correction. "Yes." He looked toward the darkened sewing stations. "I kept thinking if I could get somewhere better, make more money, become successful again, then I'd fix everything later. But you left us with $240. His jaw tightened. "I know. 2 children, Evan. I know. No, I need you to hear it." Natalie's voice remained controlled. "You didn't leave a bad marriage. You left 2 children wondering whether their father had decided they were too expensive to love." Evan lowered his eyes. "That's not what I thought. It doesn't matter what you thought. That's what they felt." Silence settled between them. "I'm sorry," he said. Natalie believed he meant it. That did not erase anything. But it mattered. Evan looked around again. "You did something incredible here." "We did." He nodded. "Then he made the mistake." Maybe me leaving pushed you." Natalie became completely still. Evan immediately sensed it. "That came out wrong. It came out exactly how you think about it. No, Natalie, I meant sometimes something terrible forces people to become stronger." She looked directly at him. You leaving didn't build this. I know, do you? Yes. Natalie shook her head. No. Because if you did, you wouldn't be looking for your fingerprints on it. Evan stared at her. Natalie pointed toward the sewing stations. Denise gave me 11 feet of storage room when I had nowhere to work. She pointed toward Keisha's desk. Keisha helped me understand numbers I was drowning in. Then toward the training area. Monica taught me how to stop pricing my labor like I should be grateful anyone paid me. Her voice softened. Aaliyah did homework in a laundromat. Caleb slept on plastic chairs while I finished alterations. She touched the table. Customers trusted me before I trusted myself. Then she placed her palm against her chest. And I worked. Evan looked down. We built this after you left, Natalie said. Not because you left. The distinction filled the room. After a moment, Evan asked quietly, Who's we? Natalie looked around. Everybody you didn't see. That hurt. It was supposed to. But Natalie was not trying to punish him. She was refusing to let him rewrite the story. Evan nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. I thought you were the one holding me back. Natalie's expression softened slightly. Evan continued. When I saw that billboard, I realized how much I needed that to be true. What that you were the reason I couldn't get ahead. He gave a bitter laugh. Because if you weren't, then I had to admit I ran away from my own life. Natalie watched him. For the first time, Evan was speaking without defending himself. I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight, he said. Good. And I'm not asking to come home. There is no home for you to come back to. He flinched. Natalie continued gently. There's my home. The kids' home. You have your home. Evan nodded. I understand. If you want to repair your relationship with Aaliyah and Caleb, do it. I do. Then stop making promises. He looked at her. Call when you say you'll call. Show up when you say you'll show up. Send support without making me ask. Remember school events? Natalie paused. Be boringly reliable. Evan smiled faintly. Boringly reliable. That's what children need. I can do that. Don't tell me. Natalie took a sip of coffee. Show them. Evan nodded. When the conversation ended, they walked toward the front door. Then Evan noticed the small, clear box on the shelf. Inside was the old envelope. Mom's fixing money. He stopped. The $12. Natalie nodded. Can I see it? She handed him the envelope. Evan opened it carefully. A $10 bill. 2 ones. That was all. He stared at them. You kept the actual bills, yes. Natalie leaned against the shelf. The $240 you left told me how little I had. She pointed toward the envelope. These $12 told me I could make more. Evan looked at the bills again. The difference was devastatingly simple. One amount represented abandonment. The other represented ability. I thought that money I left would carry you for a while. It carried us for days. Evan closed the envelope. And this, Natalie smiled. This carried me further. He returned it to her. Outside, the evening had cooled. Evan stood on the sidewalk. Natalie. Yes, I really am proud of you. This time, Natalie understood what he was trying to say. Then be proud of Aaliyah and Caleb, too. I am. And prove it. I will. Evan walked toward his SUV. Natalie watched only long enough to see him leave. Then she locked the door. She did not feel victorious. There was no satisfaction in seeing Evan ashamed. What she felt was quieter. Closure without reunion. A boundary without hatred. A possibility that her children might someday have a better father, even if she would never again have him as a husband. Natalie returned the $12 to the shelf. Then she removed the yellow measuring tape from around her neck and laid it across the cutting table. For months she had used it to measure what could be saved. Soon someone else would need that lesson. And when a young mother entered second measure carrying a damaged interview dress, 2 children and only $17, Natalie would finally understand what it meant to pass forward the kind of help Denise had once given her. Not rescue. A place to begin. The billboard stayed above East Broad Street for another 7 weeks. Natalie Lewis passed it, occasionally. The first time, Aaliyah nearly climbed across the back seat trying to photograph it. "Mom, slow down, I'm driving. You're huge, I'm aware." Caleb pressed his face against the window. "Are you famous?" "No." "Are you rich?" Still no. Caleb sighed. The children laughed. Natalie did too. Then the billboard disappeared behind them. She never looked back. The campaign brought attention to second measure. More customers arrived. 2 local businesses contacted Natalie about expansion. Someone even suggested opening another location. 6 months earlier, Natalie might have said yes immediately. More sounded like safety. More customers. More money. More proof. Now she knew better. She sat with Keisha and Monica and studied every proposal. One evening, Monica pointed at the numbers. "You could expand. I could, but..." Natalie looked toward the apprentices. "Not yet." Monica smiled. "Why?" "Because I can't train people properly if I double everything overnight. And I'm not paying anyone badly just so I can say I have 2 stores. Monica closed the folder. "Good answer." Natalie touched the yellow measuring tape around her neck. Measure twice. Growth mattered. But sustainable growth mattered more. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Denise Harper entered second measure, carrying a cardboard box. Natalie looked up. What happened? Denise placed the box on the cutting table. Building got sold. Natalie's smile disappeared. Harper laundry 30-day notice. What are you going to do? Denise shrugged. Figure something out. Natalie recognized the sentence. She had used it herself when she had no idea what came next. Denise began examining the garments on the rack. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you're about to make me your charity project. Natalie laughed. I wouldn't dare. Good. Natalie waited. Then she asked, how would you feel about working more? Denise looked at her. Doing what? Customer intake, scheduling, helping train new apprentices. I don't sew like you. You know customers. That I do. You know this neighborhood. Better than Google. And you know when people need encouragement and when they need somebody to stop making excuses. Denise smiled. That last skill costs extra. I'll put it in the budget. Denise's expression softened. You serious? Natalie nodded. A real job, real paycheck. Denise looked around the shop. Years earlier, she had offered Natalie a folding table beside a row of dryers. Now Natalie was offering her a desk. Not repayment, continuation. I'll think about it, Denise said. She lasted 9 minutes. When do I start? Monday morning. Denise sat behind the front desk, complaining about Natalie's filing system. Keisha, now second measure's official bookkeeper, leaned over the partition. I've been complaining about it for months. Natalie looked between them. I regret hiring both of you. No, you don't, Denise said. She didn't. Second measure continued growing carefully. One apprentice completed the program and found work at a tailoring shop. Another stayed. A third began taking community college business classes while working part-time. Natalie kept the original $12 envelope on the shelf. Then, on a rainy afternoon, the bell above the front door rang. A young woman entered, holding the hands of 2 children. She looked about 30. Her coat was wet. Over one arm hung a garment bag. Are you Natalie? Yes. My caseworker told me you might be able to help. The woman opened the garment bag. Inside was a dark green dress. It's for an interview tomorrow. Natalie examined it. The side seam had torn several inches. There was also damage near the hem. I can repair it. How much? Natalie gave her the standard price. The woman became quiet. Natalie recognized that silence immediately. The woman opened her wallet. I have $17. Her cheeks reddened. I know that's not enough. Natalie glanced at the 2 children. For 1 second, she was back at her kitchen table. 4 envelopes. $240. Aaliyah asking if they were poor. But Natalie did not say, "I'll do it for free." Instead, she asked, "What are you good at?" The woman looked confused. What kind of work have you done? Warehouse, mostly. Inventory." Keisha looked up from her desk. Natalie smiled. "We have 3 boxes of donated professional clothing that need sorting by size and condition." The woman stared at her. "You want me to work for the difference if you're interested." "How long? 2 hours." The woman looked at the dress, then at Natalie. "Deal." Denise watched from behind the desk. She said nothing. But Natalie caught the small smile. 2 hours later, the donated clothing was organized better than it had ever been. Natalie repaired the green dress. When the woman tried it on, she stood before the mirror and ran her hands over the restored seam. "You can't see where it was torn. That's usually the goal." The woman smiled. "Thank you." Natalie shook her head. "You earned it." Those 3 words changed the woman's expression. Not gratitude, dignity. After she left, Aaliyah came from the back room carrying her school backpack. At 10 now, she had grown taller. She pointed toward the sewing table. "You let her do what Miss Keisha did?" Natalie nodded. "Something like that." Aaliyah looked at the yellow measuring tape. "Can I measure something?" Natalie hesitated. That tape had belonged to Lorraine, then to her. For years, Natalie had treated it almost like a fragile memory. But memories were not meant to remain locked away. They were meant to become instructions. Natalie removed the tape from around her neck. She placed it in Aaliyah's hands. "Come here." A pair of trousers waited for hemming. Natalie showed her daughter where to begin. "Hold it straight." Aaliyah measured. 29.5. Again. Aaliyah grinned. "Twice always when you can." She measured again. Still 29.5. Good. Aaliyah reached for the tailor's chalk. Then she paused. "What if you measure wrong?" Natalie looked at the shop around them. Denise helping a customer. Keisha working through payroll. 2 apprentices sewing at nearby machines. The original envelope with $12 still resting on the shelf. Outside somewhere across Columbus, another advertisement had already replaced Natalie's billboard. She thought about Evan, about the hospital, about $240, about all the things life had cut away before she had been ready. Natalie placed her hand over Aaliyah's. "Sometimes you get to measure first," she said. "And sometimes life makes the cut before you're ready." Aaliyah looked at her. "What do you do then?" Natalie smiled. "You don't throw the whole thing away." She guided Aaliyah's hand across the fabric. "You make something new." The sewing machines continued humming around them. Natalie no longer needed her face above the city to prove anything. Billboards came down, campaigns ended, people moved on to the next story. But beneath all of that, second measure remained. A room full of people earning their own money, learning skills, teaching others, repairing what could be repaired, transforming what could not. And on the cutting table between Natalie's hand and her daughter's, an old yellow measuring tape stretched across a piece of fabric waiting to become something it had never been before. Some people will look at Natalie's story and believe the billboard was the victory. It wasn't. The victory happened much earlier when a frightened mother with $240 stopped measuring her future by what someone else had taken from her. Denise did not save Natalie. She gave her a corner and expected her to work. Monica did not save her. She gave her knowledge and expected her to learn. Keisha did not need Natalie to save her either. They exchanged skills, respected each other's labor, and eventually built something stronger together. That is what meaningful kindness can look like. It does not always carry someone. Sometimes it gives them a tool, opens a door, pays them fairly, and respects them enough to let them walk through on their own. Measure twice. Cut once was Lorraine's lesson about fabric. But life does not always give us that privilege. Sometimes the cut comes first: a betrayal, a lost job, a closed door, someone leaving when they promised to stay. We cannot always choose what is taken from us, but we can still choose what we create from what remains. And Natalie's greatest victory was never that Evan finally saw her. It was that by the time he did, she no longer needed him to. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from very little, share your story in the comments. Someone reading it may need your hope today. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs reminding that a painful ending can still become the material for a new beginning. Subscribe and stay with us for more stories about dignity, kindness, resilience, and second chances.